I just got done filming my video and I realised I should have said at the start, if you're just here for a quick bit of advice, then instead of watching this entire video as an alternate, you can just look down in the description section below and I'll leave some links and bits of advice.
Starting this video off with a positive. Look at you. It's Mr. Urkel. What are you doing? It's really hard to speak to a camera. I don't have experience with doing this, and it's like as soon as I get in front of the camera I go blank. I want to talk about my mother's death today, just my experiences with that, how I've been going with what occurred, ways I've been coping, and inspiration I've pulled from it, because everyone throughout their lifetime will have to experience losing someone they love, and I feel like the experience I went through is pretty, extremely uncommon. Essentially I lost my mum, and that's the bottom line of it, but the way that it actually occurred, you don't hear about other people going through the same thing, and that was really tough for me after it happened, because if I'm going through something that's uncommon or rare, then I like to connect with other people who've gone through the same thing, to feel like I'm less alone and to get advice off them about how they coped with what they went through. Yet that was something that was pretty hard for me to do with what I went through with Mum. I want to start off by saying that if you're watching this because you can relate to what I'm going through, then I just want to put out there that I will be talking a bit about Mum's actual death. So if you're in a place where you feel like that could sort of trigger you in a bad way, bring you back to whatever experience you had, then it might be a good idea to not watch this at this current time, because I also know that, oh my god, it might be good to not watch this at this current time, because I know that after my mum passed away, there were certain things that would really upset me if I saw or heard about them. So I feel like over the past 7 and a bit months since Mum has died, I've gone through particular blocks of recovery from that event and the grief of her death. The first month was definitely the hardest of them all. For the first month I was constantly in a state of shock and feeling traumatized, which is an absolutely horrible feeling. The best way to put it would be, I felt like a zombie just walking around, completely mindless, just managing to function, but barely functioning, barely able to just keep myself from feeling like I was going crazy. And then after the first month I did notice a bit of an improvement, and then I had to deal with the next 2 months, making it a total of 3 months since Mum had died. And some of that zombie-likeness, if that makes sense, disappeared, and I was able to function a bit better. I found that life did feel a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more beautiful, because after Mum died I remember looking around and I just thought the world isn't really beautiful to me anymore. I feel like there's no point. I felt like the only reason I was still here was because of my family members that are left. Besides them, I just thought like there's absolutely no point in being here. I've just lost the person who means absolutely everything to me. And I also put blame on myself for her death, because when she was actually dying, I was present and I did everything that I could to help, but it still wasn't good enough. I still couldn't do much at all. So I also felt really horrible for not noticing that she was going to die, which sounds ridiculous, because how are you meant to pick up when someone's about to die? Sometimes they don't really show symptoms, and in Mum's case she didn't look any different During the first, I think 2 to 3 months after my mum's death, I went on a holiday to Tasmania, which was so good for me. Because I should also mention that my mum died at my house, obviously, if you didn't know. And so not only did I have to deal with the fact that she died, the fact that I'd watched it occur, and I also had to deal with the fact that it was here where I live. And so I felt like my house was this safe space I could come to beforehand. I felt very comfortable here, very at home, and then I felt very scared and spooked out. I felt like the house was tainted because of what I'd seen, and I couldn't walk through the area where it occurred without feeling totally creeped out and scared and just brought back to that night. Like every time I had to walk past there for the first, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, I just relived the whole thing. It was horrible. So I avoided that part of the house as much as I could, and now I'm at this point where every time I go to the areas that she was there the night she passed away, I'm totally aware of what happened, but I'm not brought back and reliving it in my head. I'm just like, okay, this happened there, and that's horrible, but that is okay, and I can accept that, and I can live with it, and I can get on with what I'm doing right now without this destroying my day. If you're going through a similar thing where you're in an area that really affects you to be around because you have this traumatic experience that you went through there, I think it can be really positive to take a break from that area for a while. Like I went and lived with my sister for 2 weeks after Mum died, and I'd come back to this house during the day to clean it, to feed and play with my dogs, to organise everything for the funeral, relating to her death. And then going on holiday after a while just really took my mind off everything. It distracted me. It meant that I didn't have to come back to this house every night and relive the horrors that I went through to the same degree. And I'm not sure how this worked, but when I came back from my holiday, sure, the house didn't feel as nice as it felt before, but it was certainly more easy to handle being here in this environment, and it's just got easier ever since. Then after 3 months, I went through another 2 months, like main 2 months of recovery where I thought about Mum every single day as I had, and I still do. But it's not like every single day for every single second I was thinking of Mum, because for the first few months, like pretty much most of the day I was thinking of Mum, which gets so fucking draining when you're trying to just live your life and you're just thinking of your mum who's dead and everything that happened around that. I felt like I didn't really have a life outside of what occurred because I was just reliving it all the time and torturing myself over what happened, blaming myself, and it's so draining. So I got to this point where everything really gradually started to feel better and more manageable. It's not like with this sort of recovery from grief, it's not like I could look back a week ago and go, oh wow, I've improved so much. I wouldn't feel that different, but I could stop and go, I'm at the 5-month mark since Mum died. I can look back 2 months ago and I notice that I'm functioning better. I feel happier in general. I don't feel like a zombie anymore. I'm not constantly living in a state of shock. Occasionally I might be brought back to that like a few times a week, and I might feel shocked and a bit traumatized. I might have bad dreams occasionally, but it's not the same as before. I was pretty scared that after Mum died that I would develop post-traumatic stress disorder because I was displaying the symptoms for it, but just putting this out there right now, what really helped me was talking about what I'd been through, and that was only appropriate with a select number of people. It's something I couldn't publicise at the time, and nor would I want to, like I sort of, am talking about it now. I just couldn't do it at the time, and I didn't want to worry other people who knew my mum, so what I did was I turned to people I could trust. Like I've 2 friends who are counsellors, for example. They were fantastic to talk to. Talked to some family members who, you know, like one who was there who went through the shit that I went through, and other family members who weren't present when Mum passed, but who were just as greatly affected as I was. I also ended up seeing a counsellor, and that's something a lot of people are ashamed to admit, like if they've gone to therapy, or if they feel like they should, but there's nothing to be ashamed about that. It's such a shame that there's this silly stigma attached to that. It was the best thing for me at the time to go and talk to a counsellor about the shit that I was going through. I can equate it to sort of lugging around a great load on your shoulders emotionally, and then you sort of take it off and you talk about it, and you know, little bit by little bit it gets a bit easier, and you're not being weighed down so much by these horrors that follow you like this dark cloud. A few days after Mum died, I also got in contact with Lifeline, who I really suggest. That's a support number that you can call anytime. I'll leave the number for it down below in the comment thing. They were lovely. I was on hold for 20 minutes, but it was worth it. I was just reliving these horrible flashbacks, and yeah, I was just able to talk to this really nice, understanding guy for like about an hour. And so if you feel like talking about your experiences will help, I definitely suggest calling a support number like Lifeline. If you just need to get something out instantly, turning to people you love and trust who you know will understand you, like friends, family members. If you feel like you need professional help, which a lot of people do after someone they love dies, and that's 100% okay, then if you are living in Australia, and I think it's 25 and under, I definitely recommend Headspace. Just Google Headspace and you can find a centre near you that can provide counsellors, therapists, whatever's appropriate for you, for the help you need. And if you are over 25, then I suggest making an appointment with your GP and asking them for a mental health care plan, which means you can access therapy for cheaper than you could if you didn't have it. So now I'm at it's a bit over 7 months since my mum died. So I've had this other chunk and my dog's here, I've had this other chunk of recovery. Yeah, he's famous. So now, it's been... What are you doing? I can't take it seriously with a pug sitting here. So now, it's been about 7 months, and I feel like from 5 to 7 months, I've improved again. When I look back, most of the time she's so cute. I feel like most days are quite good. I'm actually having one of those bad days today, which is why I'm talking about it. I had something bad happen yesterday, and I just didn't know how to deal with the situation. It's one of those things that if Mum was here, I would have gone and talked to her, because that's what I did all the time with Mum. She was my mum and my best friend. I'd go talk to her about everything. And now I don't have one of those people who are constantly there for me. So after Mum died, I feel like I've really had to mature and just become an adult. I had to grow up a bit faster than I had expected. So yeah, I've sort of been brought back in this place where I'm just like, oh man, this sucks, Mum's died. I'm kind of upset because something happened and I just couldn't handle it, and I feel like I wish Mum was there so I could talk to her and get a hug. Adjusting to the new normal is a huge thing that you have to do after someone dies. You sort of have this normality in your world that you're used to. For me, it was Mum would go to work most days, and Dad would go to work, or he'd be here at home with me when I was at home. Mum would get home from work, we would take these buffheads for a walk, Mum would cook dinner, we'd sort of sit there after eating dinner and we'd watch a show we love, like X Factor, and I'd sit up late and talk with her half of the time. And so that's what I was used to. Like my typical day, I had so much to do with my mum. You get a little underbite. And then that was taken away from me so suddenly, and I had to go, holy shit, like this huge figure in my life has been removed all of a sudden, and I've had to get used to that, and I've had to deal with things that mum would have dealt with beforehand, or at least assisted me with. And there's so many things that's occurred with, and I feel like this is another point completely. I try and use my mum's death and her life to inspire me. I try and look at the positives, even when it feels like it's so negative, like, oh, my mum has died, that's horrible, how can there be anything positive in it? But I try and find those positives, like, I've grown up so much since my mum has died. Before mum died, she was the main income provider for the family. I worked, but, I didn't earn that much. And now that mum's passed away, I'm working all the time, which is a real positive for me. I'm focusing my time and energy in something productive that's earning me money, that's helping places of businesses, that's improving my skills. And another point, like socially, I've really improved again since mum died. I sort of, like, you'll see little kids sometimes hiding behind their mums when they're in public, and that's sort of how I felt, which it's kind of weird for someone of my age, but I was, like, I've always been very, very shy, and now I've grown a lot socially because I've just had to, like, to be blunt, grow up and deal with it. I don't have anyone to hide behind anymore. And then there are other skills that I've acquired, like I didn't cook that much beforehand, and now I'm cooking frequently. I cleaned the house before, but now I'm doing a lot more, like gardening, outside work, just inside work, general things that every adult has to know, but I didn't really have to know about before because, like, mum took care of it. What else do I want to say, Bella? What else do I want to say? I think it is a really good idea to try and find things that make you happy, or to fill up your time to give you any sort of feeling of positivity after you've been through something that just makes you feel really negative all the time. And for me, those things were things like skateboarding. I absolutely love skating, so I'd go for big skates, I'd listen to music as I do it. I'd take my dogs for a walk, like a huge walk, so that would fill up a lot of time. That would make these guys happy. I'd feel happy seeing them be happy. I went cycling a bit, just a lot of physical activity. That's the shit that makes me happy. For other people, it could be something like artistic things, painting, making crafts, making necklaces, doing woodwork. Or some people turn to work and sort of become workaholics, but I think it's a good idea to also know where to draw a line. If you're being obsessive with something, it could be a good idea to just be careful of how much time and energy you're putting into one thing. I just realised that I haven't really talked much about my mum's actual death. Also want to put out there that after my mum passed away, I did, heaps of people came to me to ask me what had happened, and at the time I didn't feel comfortable sharing all the details of what happened, so I just watered it down and I said she died in her sleep, which is technically true, but that implies there was a simplicity to it. I hope that makes sense. Like, it was simple and it was quick. It sort of, to me, implies that I woke up in the morning and I went into her bedroom and I went, oh shit, mum's dead. The end. like it's that simple, but it really wasn't that simple. So what happened was, it happened at 4:30 in the morning, I think it was. I heard bangs, and Bella, sit down, be normal, and I instantly was in panic, hearing just bangs on a wall, because I know this might sound weird, but every time I wake up to bangs, I'm instantly just freaked out, probably because of things that have happened in the past. So I was sort of in panic after 2 seconds of hearing banging, and then I hear Jay, get up, mum's in trouble, and then I'm just like, oh god. I instantly just felt like being sick then and there. I didn't even know what was happening. At the time I thought an intruder had broken in because of the bangs, and I thought mum was in trouble because she was being attacked. So I sort of ran into where they were, and I was even more shocked because there was no intruder. I just saw my dad standing next to my mum, and my mum was just laying there, totally lifeless. It felt like everything was in slow motion at the time. It would have only been a couple of minutes, but like I walked up to mum, well, I ran up to mum's side, and I just stood there and I looked at her face, and she was gone. There was just no one home. And that's fucking scary when you're touching someone and you're yelling at them and they don't respond to anything. There's not even an eye movement. That's so frightening. It's hard to talk about this topic. So I didn't really know exactly what was going on when I saw my mum in that sort of state, but as scary as it was, and I knew at that time that was the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my entire life, and I've seen some pretty horrible shit. I still felt like she would be okay because I knew exactly what I had to do, which was get on the phone to 000, and I did, and I called an ambulance. So I assumed that they would come, pop her in the ambulance, zoom away to Rosebud Hospital, zoom away to the hospital, and then we would go in later that day, visit mum, and she'd be alright, sitting up in bed, just feeling a bit tired over whatever happened. If anything, I thought she might have just fainted, but I soon realised that wasn't the case because, the revival process started and she wasn't responding to absolutely anything, and you don't try and really revive someone when, they've simply fainted. Soon, shortly after I found out that there was no pulse, she wasn't breathing, there wasn't a heartbeat, so instantly I was just like, holy shit, how can this be? That sent me into even greater shock, and I was already in such shock that I just felt like vomiting, and I just thought, this has to be a crazy nightmare. Why aren't I waking up? Please wake up. And I knew it wasn't a nightmare, but I was still just thinking, I've got to wake up from this. This can't be real life. This is so horrible. How can it be real? So after about 5 minutes, 2 ambulances came, and they didn't do what I expected them to do. They came inside and set their equipment up on the floor and, brought mum out, and then for an hour, bit over an hour, they tried reviving her through various methods, and for that hour I sat next to her and I watched them try to revive her. I watched her lifeless on the ground for an hour. I mean, imagine that. Watching someone who only a few hours beforehand had been full of life and energy, and you didn't spot anything different or wrong with them or about them, and then all of a sudden they're just lying there lifeless on the ground, and you're touching them and you're saying, "Mum, wake up, jump back in." You're grabbing them and they're just not responding at all. That's really tough. I had to deal with the grief of losing my mum, but half of the problem was the actual experience. For me anyway, that was a really tough experience to go through. And then at one stage, they did something when they were reviving her, and she, made a noise, and I just went, oh my god. And I felt through the shock this spark of happiness. I thought, they've saved her, she's back, I don't know what's happened, but she's here again. And then within 5 seconds I realised that I was wrong, and it was just her body reacting to whatever they'd done. And so as the time went on, I went from having so much hope to gradually losing all hope. The ambulance members eventually stepped back, except one of them. We were just also just standing around her body, and one of them was just doing what they were doing to revive her. And all of a sudden I realised that this is it. We have about 2 minutes, and if she doesn't come back, that's it for this life. She's gone. And I knelt by her side and I grabbed her leg, and that sounds fruity because I don't really do this, but I started praying. I was just like, God, we don't speak much, but if you're there, and you sort of turn to these funny measures in your head that you wouldn't usually turn to. I mean, I'm not saying that's funny, but for me it's funny because it's something I don't really do. And I remember also thinking, like, if mum can live through this, then I will do this. I will burn this entire house down and everything I own and love if it means mum can come back. If someone hands me a knife right now, I will slice off my own legs and my arm if it means that mum can come back and be safe and comfortable and happy and healthy. I thought the weirdest shit about the last 10-20 minutes of her life. And so, I don't know, I didn't really hear other people talk about that, but that's something I went through. If it makes you feel better to know that, if that's what you've been through too. And for months after mum died, I remember thinking that I knew that there was no way that she could be brought back, but I just remember thinking, like, I'll do this if she can come back to life, which was silly because it's like, that can't happen, but it's still something I went through. So then came a point, over an hour into the process, bordering on to about an hour and a half, I reckon, where everything went quiet and the woman who'd been trying to revive mum just stopped, and then they said, "I'm so sorry, there's nothing more we can do." And that's when I knew it was all over. I sort of turned and I said, are you sure, is there anything else we can do? Like, if I keep trying to revive her, do you think it's worth it? Because I was so willing to do anything to keep her alive, to keep her going, to bring her back. But they said, they hadn't had a heartbeat for 20 minutes. And later I found out that if someone's heart hasn't, done that for 20 minutes, then there comes a point where their brain has been so starved of oxygen that if they do get brought back, they're probably going to be severely disabled. And that's something else majorly that I dealt with when I was watching mum be revived. There came a point where I realised that there were two options. She was either going to die, or if she lived through it, she was probably going to be severely disabled, and that meant either putting her in a home or having me look after her for the rest of her life, which I would have done happily. Not necessarily happily, that would have been very devastating, but I would do that for mum, no problem. She looked after me so much when I was a kid, I'd look after her too. And that was really tough for me to realise as I was standing there watching her try to be revived. I thought, what's better, what's worse? Like, I don't want to lose my mum, but I don't want her to be in that sort of state for the rest of her life where she can't do shit for herself. That was a horrible realisation. And from there on, I knew my life would never be the same regardless of the outcome. About 10 minutes, 15 minutes before they stopped reviving her, I actually knew that she had died and that she wasn't going to come back. This might sound silly, but sometimes you just have feelings inside of you and you can't really explain why they're right, but you just know that they're right. And I knew that she was gone. I knew that there was just no hope anymore, but I still thought in my head, no, this can't be it. She's just got to come back. She's got to come back. So I was doing everything I could to, keep that hope alive and keep her there. But as I had anticipated, she did pass away. So after she died, the ambulance crew slowly packed everything up, and then it was just us left there, standing next to my mum's body, which is another, shitty thing within itself. Having to stand next to someone for, I don't know, probably 40 minutes in total as I waited for the cops to come, and then, having to deal with family members be very, very upset, and cops asking you questions about what had just happened, and I'm thinking, I don't even know what just happened, mate. I think this is a bad dream. Can you wake me up? That's what I felt like telling him, but I just had to talk about the most traumatic thing that had ever happened. And, then after that, I'm really not going to go into this because I could talk for a whole nother 2 hours or something. Like for the rest of the day, I had to go tell other people I loved about it. Like my sister, that was the second worst thing about Mum dying. Having to break that news to someone you love is so horrible. Having to break it to her co-workers, to some of her friends, to some family members, it's not fun at all, but I was very lucky that I had family members there who did most of that work for me, because I'd been through so much, I just couldn't really deal with it. So I'm going to end this video by saying I apologise for how long it is, but if you're one of the people who I'm sort of making this video for, then I feel like it could be really helpful for you to be able to hear this sort of stuff from someone who's been through something similar to you. And I guess I know there's people who are going to watch it just because they, want to know about my experiences, and that's fine too. I hope that if you go through something like this in the future, then you can remember back to this and you can find inspiration and help and advice from it.